What's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we get to do a video of a series that I haven't gotten to do in a really long time. I am insanely excited to talk about Toy Story. Toy Story 5 is going to be coming out right around the corner. In fact, it's coming up a lot sooner than I thought it was. For some reason, I thought it was the end of this month or the beginning of next month. It literally comes out in 2 days, the day that I'm recording this. So I quickly went through and I rewatched all of the Toy Story movies. I wanted to come on here and make a video specifically talking about the original trilogy and how perfect the original trilogy was, and going on to talk about Toy Story 4 and where I think they failed with Toy Story 4, and why I've always kind of had the take that Toy Story 3, despite being a really good ending, it felt like it was a good end for a trilogy, and it was okay for them to continue on the Toy Story movie. I just think that they should have done it a very specific way, and I never really liked the way that they continued on with Toy Story 4. So that's essentially what this video is going to be talking about. But the main question for this video is, should it have stayed a trilogy?
The Trilogy Talks!
Okay, so to be brief and to be quick about the original trilogy, I just kind of want to come on here and talk about some things that I really like about the original movies, and I kind of want to just brush past these so that I could get to the point of Toy Story 4 and what I think they should do to fix it in Toy Story 5 now that that's coming out, and I'm probably going to have a review of that movie up in a couple of days. But overall, I think that the original Toy Story trilogy does a really great job of kind of showcasing how pivotal toys can be in a young person's life. I think that they do a really good job with, in the first movie, Andy is a young kid who has clearly recently lost his father, and Woody was a toy that he was given from his father, which is why he has this strong, very personal connection with Woody. And I think all throughout the films, they do a really good job of showcasing that in a lot of ways, Woody feels almost like a parental figure for Andy, and he wants to make sure that Andy, you know, gets everything he wants out of life and that he grows and he develops to be like a very strong guy. And I think that that is something really interesting. I think that they do a really good job of kind of showcasing how, despite the toys not being sentient in the eyes of the kids, they still do a lot of things to look out for the kids and kind of set the kids on the right path. And I think that that's something that the original Toy Story trilogy does relatively well. I think that all of the characters have relatively interesting arcs throughout the three movies. The three main ones that we focus on is Woody with his, you know, acceptance of other toys and the fact that he's always the self-centered person because he is Andy's favorite toy, and having to learn to share the spotlight with Buzz, I think, is a really good arc for his character. I think that Buzz learning that he is a toy and learning what it means to be a toy and how to fulfill his purpose as a toy and to make Andy happy and to overall just support the friend group in any way he can. I think that he also has an interesting dynamic with Buzz Lightyear needs to become a leader, and he needs to, you know, step up whenever Woody goes missing in the second movie. He becomes a leader, and he has this, like, ability to become a smart person, and the way that he kind of like learns throughout these movies is really interesting. I think that Buzz Lightyear is low-key my favorite character in this entire trilogy. And then we have the third character, Wendy, who learns how to become a part of a friend group, learns how to overcome her trauma, and let somebody love them again. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting, beautiful arcs and emotional storytelling with that. And overall, I think those three characters are really fantastic, and even a lot of the side characters have little bits and pieces of them that work really well. I think Toy Story 3 has one of the most ahead of its time arcs with the Barbie character, and everything that she does with Ken in that film I think is absolutely fantastic. I think overall they have some great villains in this movie. I think that the way that they make a commentary on collectors is really interesting, because as Disney is the brand that is pumping out these movies, it is kind of interesting. A lot of Disney adults are the kind of people who take things from kids and make it where kids can't really enjoy things because scalpers are all over specific merch drops, and making it where, oh, there's this really cool limited edition Disney 100th anniversary figurine coming out for this oddly specific character. Some kids might want that, but instead these Disney adults are picking them up immediately and trying to sell them for a shit ton of money, and they don't really understand the importance of toys as much because they're scalpers. I think that that was an interesting commentary. I think that Lotso the bear being bitter and evil because all he ever wanted was to be loved, and now these kids are kind of like, I mean, these new toys are coming in and kind of ruining things for him. I think that Lotso is an incredible villain as well. And I just think that overall, these movies have a lot that work relatively well. Personally, growing up, I never was a big fan of Toy Story. I'm a diehard fan of Pixar. For people who are new here, Pixar Tattoo, this is supposed to be an entire animation sleeve eventually when I'm not broke. But I really love the Pixar movies, but I've never really was able to get as on board with the Toy Story movies. And rewatching this trilogy, I think I do have a little bit more of an appreciation of them. I think that they do an interesting job just kind of showcasing how important your childhood is to who you turn out to be. And I really like that. I think that they do a good job with parallels. Like, we don't see much of the Sid I believe that's his name, Sid, the little evil kid from the first movie. We don't see a whole lot of him, but he kind of treats things really poorly, and then he grows up and he's not doing super successful in life, and I think that that's really interesting. So overall, I really like the original trilogy. I think it has a lot of good things that work really well for it. I think the animation style throughout those three films, watching it evolve by the time you get to Toy Story 3, and there's a lot of really beautifully animated moments in Toy Story 3, I really, really liked it. But now, to dive into Toy Story 4, and should it have been made, let's talk about it. Okay, but before we get into Toy Story 4, I actually kind of want to talk about some of the things that I think they really should have tackled in Toy Story 4. I think one of the most important things is the first three movies, I think, really still could stand alone as a trilogy and could still be considered a trilogy, because at the end of the day, the first three Toy Story movies are Andy's trilogy. So when you're making a fourth Toy Story movie and you don't want it to get the accusations of like, oh my god, this is just a cheap cash grab, what I really think you needed to focus on is these toys are now Bonnie's toys. What does that mean? Who is Bonnie as a character? How does Bonnie play with these toys? How do these toys help her in her development? I think is a really important thing to learn, because even though Andy probably gets maybe like 10 minutes worth of screen time throughout the original Andy trilogy, we get a really good idea of who he is as a person. We understand that he's really into cowboys. We understand that he's somebody who is a really good older brother. He's somebody who's really good with like sharing is caring, having compassion, all these different things. Andy is a really good guy, and we get to learn more about him through the way he plays with his toys and the way that his imagination works and the way that they put that to film with all the like, you know, cutscenes of like the beginning of Toy Story 3, and we're seeing how Andy is playing with these toys. I think that that's really cool. I really like it. I think that it does a good job of kind of showcasing the importance of kids being able to embrace their imagination through these toys. And so whenever we get to Toy Story 4, Bonnie doesn't really get any of that. We spend literally more time with Andy in Toy Story 4 than we do with Bonnie. And I think that that is such a bad thing. So to talk about Toy Story 4, I'm just going to go ahead and dive right into it. I have a list of things that I specifically don't like about Toy Story 4. I'm just kind of going to rapid fire go through them. First one, Forky is an annoying character. Is that okay? Absolutely. I think that in a movie, you're not going to really like every single character. You're not going to be able to connect with every single character. I think that the whole "I'm trash" joke gets overplayed incredibly fast. And the first act is just so repetitive of like, okay, Woody is so overbearing, over the top. He needs to make sure that Bonnie is having like the best day ever. He needs to make sure that she's always happy. And he takes it to the extreme, which is something that Woody always does. But it's one of those things where it's just like, you see 4 movies of this. I got to a point where like I'm like, why are we still focused on Woody? I love Woody, but Woody 100% was Andy's toy. And the fact that this movie starts off with, you know, Bonnie not picking Woody and Bonnie not wanting to play with Woody, I think was an interesting way to start this film, because like Woody needs to learn how to take a step back and how to not always be in charge and in control of everything, because I think that overall that's an important lesson that a lot of people need to learn, is that sometimes you're not in control of everything and you need to be okay with that. I think that being a part of a team is a very important thing that everybody should learn, because whenever it comes to like work or school or whatever, there's going to be times in life where you kind of need to take a back seat and you need to be able to participate in a group scenario instead of always being in control of everything. And Woody never learns that. Woody is like the most stubborn Pixar character, and I genuinely hate the guy. And I hate that we're 4 movies in and he's still being the most selfish, self-centered prick ever. This character hasn't had any form of development at all, and it kills me that in this movie they kind of continue with that. He's like, I have to make sure everything works out for Bonnie, and he can't let anybody else control, he can't let anybody else help, and it just feels like such like a misogynistic character almost. And that does genuinely kind of drive me insane that we carry on with that, because in my opinion, I think that it would have been a lot more interesting if one of the main characters was a toy that already was Bonnie's toy, or Jessie, because Bonnie seems to really like the Jessie toy. I think that the fact that in Toy Story 5, Jessie's finally going to get to be the main character is so important and so crucial, and it genuinely drives me insane that that hasn't happened sooner. Why is Woody still the main character of Toy Story 4? I'll never understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. I really don't like that. And overall, his dynamic with Forky is just such a cliche Pixar thing of like, here's a character who's super cool and we all know and love, and here's a character who's wild and cuckoo and crazy and super young and immature. And so they have to go on an adventure together. Pixar loves to do that. It feels very cliche. It feels tired. It feels exhausted. I'm tired of the Woody character. Please don't have them that much in Toy Story 5. The next thing, all of a sudden, Buzz Lightyear is an idiot. That drove me insane when I watched Toy Story 4. In Toy Story 2, which I just rewatched, Buzz is such a smart character. He's so capable. He completely is able to come up with a plan to go to Al's toy barn. He completely figures out that Al is the person who stole Woody, and he's able to come up with all these plans for like how they're going to get to him, how they're going to save Woody, how they're going to, take care of certain things, how they navigate going into the giant toy store. Like, there are so many great Buzz moments where he's a genius and he has it on display, and that he's able to step up and be a leader when Woody is not there. And then all of a sudden in this movie, they decide to give him a bit where, oh my god, I have this problem. How do I solve it? He presses a button. Here's what it says. And he's like, let's do that. And as much as I think that it works on like a comedic level, I think that it fundamentally ruins a lot about Buzz's character arc throughout this, last couple of movies, which is that Buzz is a problem solver. He's kind of figured it out. He knows how to solve problems and he knows how to be his own leader. And now he's having to press a button to figure out what to do. And I hate that. I think that that's a little bit of a character assassination. The next one, oh wait, no, okay. Yeah, that's one of the last ones. Bonnie is barely in the movie. I've already talked about this. She's in the movie every 30 minutes to kind of remind us why we're on this adventure that we're on, because Bonnie is sad because Forky is missing. And that's pretty much all we know about her, is that she likes Forky and she so loves Forky, and that Forky's amazing. And she struggles to make friends, and that's about all that we know about her. And it does really drive me insane because we should know more about this character. She is the driving force of this film, is we need to get Forky back to Bonnie. But why though? Why do we care for Bonnie? What's interesting about Bonnie? What makes her the main character of this trilogy? Not the main character, but the main driving force of this trilogy. We have no idea. We genuinely still do not know. And that really drives me insane. And then one of the last gripes that I have with Toy Story 4, and it's honestly not even Toy Story 4's fault, but I do think the Toy Story franchise is something that is kind of interesting, because the whole concept of the toys coming to life works really well if you kind of think about the fact that what makes these toys come to life? Is it the fact that these children love them so much that they're giving them this love, and it's giving them the energy to get up and move around and basically become a sentient being? I think that that's a cool concept. And in this movie, Bonnie makes a toy out of Forky and loves Forky so much that Forky becomes a sentient being. And we don't talk about it, we don't address it, we don't do anything to acknowledge the fact that that's kind of a batshit crazy thing that just happened. And I really wish that they dove into that a little bit more, because I think that, the power of being loved by something that is so pure and wholesome as a child who, they don't have to love you. Their love is almost as unconditional as it could possibly be when it comes to unconditional love. And the fact that that is so powerful that it creates a new sentient being out of Forky is so interesting, and they don't touch on it at all. And that kind of drives me insane. But overall, there's some animation stuff with Toy Story 4 that's absolutely phenomenal and incredible and makes it definitely worth watching. I think that Bo Peep having her lost toy arc, and the whole thing about your toys are constantly going to grow up, and yes, it is the noble thing to be with your toy. I keep saying toy when I mean child. Your child is going to grow up, and eventually you're not going to have a child, and you're just going to end up in a storage box, and you're not going to be loved forever, whatever. And yes, it's a noble thing to stay with your kid all the way until they get to college and you get to see them off. That is great. But I do also like the concept of but we should still have purpose even though we're not being played with anymore. And so Bo Peep going and being a lost toy and going to these carnivals and going to these different places where they can be played with temporarily, but then they're still, able to have their own free will and stuff like that, I think is a really cool concept. I think the whole fact that she's able to break free from the societal pressures and norms of you can only have one kid is kind of fascinating. But that being said, we don't really get to explore that much. We don't do a whole lot with it. Bo Peep is just a badass, which I do love. And so overall, I like Toy Story 4 a bit. I think it is without a doubt the weakest in the franchise, but I understand what they were trying to do with it. I just hope that in this next movie they do a couple of things. Flesh out some of Bonnie's actual toys, because it's Bonnie's, room now. They're in Bonnie's room. Bonnie's the one who's playing with them. Bonnie's the one who gives them the love and attention that creates their, purpose in life. What are Bonnie's toys like? We don't really get a lot of time to explore that. Two, I would really like it if Woody is barely in Toy Story 5. I know that that's a massive ask. I unfortunately think that that's not going to happen, but I really hope he's not the main character. Please make him a third lead. I genuinely would rather spend more time with Rex or Slinky Dog than to spend that much time with Woody as a character. But I like that. I think that's relatively good. I do think that the technology versus toys is an interesting story. I'm really excited to see how they talk about it, and I'm sure it's going to be relatively good. I just am really nervous that it's going to be very much like, no, don't use iPads ever because iPads are the devil, and oh my god, you can't possibly use screens. I think that they're going to have a more nuanced take than that, and I'm really excited to see what exactly they do with it. But overall, I wanted to come on here and just talk about the Toy Story original trilogy and how the following movies could have been a really interesting Bonnie trilogy, but they kind of started off in a really bad spot, and I really need them to turn it around by the time we get to Toy Story 5 and a potential Toy Story 6. But yeah, that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow. Bow. Bow.